Good morning, everyone. How nice to be with you again. Many of you watch these in recording, so there's no gap. You can just do whatever you want. But for me, there has been a weekend. And so here I am again, and it's nice to be talking with you all. Let's start with a prayer. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, Friend, Beloved God, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Sri Yukteswar, Beloved Master Paramhansa Yogananda, Saints of all religions, dear friend Swami Kriyananda, humbly we bow to you all. Bless our lives with your constant presence. Break through our resistance that we know you are always guiding us, always loving us, always reaching out a helping hand. We are your children. We wander sometimes in great confusion through this world. But you can read our hearts. You know what our deepest desires are. Awaken us to the true path, to fulfillment in everything. Om, peace. Amen. Today is Monday, and Monday is the day that I call it Money Monday, so that I will remember to remind you that the ministry that we carry out, the mission of the masters, we call it, is being supported entirely by people who feel it's worth supporting. We have a Patreon site, which is called Mission of the Masters, and that's a marvelous platform for supporting creative people in all sorts of ways. Or you can donate directly through my website, Asha Joy, or Ananda Palo Alto. I'm in the process of actually setting up a nonprofit, which will be the mission of the Masters itself, because it's all becoming its own reality. I'm a little of two minds when I speak of this today, because your response has been so generous that everything is really flowing in a wonderful way. But I know when the COVID restrictions end, many more options will be available to me, including traveling. And so everything will shift. So I think the need for support will continue. And I'm very, 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 very grateful that all of you are inspired as I am to help make this happen. And one more, if you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel, the YouTube gods apparently are pleased and grant us many boons if you subscribe. The details of that are obscure to me, but I've been assured it's important. So if you don't mind, thank you. Okay, now we are in the very last chapter, probably not the last day, but the last chapter of our Money Magnetism book. And as usual, I've learned a lot about money by going through this book, and I hope it's been the same for you. The very last chapter is called Be Practical in Your Idealism. And that's a phrase that was heard at Ananda, is heard at Ananda continuously. Swami puts the title in quotes because those aren't his words. They were first spoken to him by Paramahansa Yogananda, which is very interesting because of all the people on the planet who've ever been on the planet who have a right to think in elevated terms and wish not to soil their hands in the sort of marketplace of money. It was Master who said to Swami, you have to be practical in your idealism. And he said that, one, because otherwise nothing ever really gets accomplished in this world unless we are practically grounded in the realities of this world. And also, it's a very important principle spiritually. And that's how Swami first approaches it. And these are some of the ideas that he talks about in the few short pages, which are the end of the book. But when I have tried to help different people through the years, through confusing situations having to do with projects, I've come to realize that be practical in your idealism is very often the missing ingredient. Everything is there. The dream is there. The idealism is there. The deep sincerity is there. Even a reasonable amount of energy is there, but it's not practical. And Swami makes an interesting comment. He said that for some people, the dream, how does he put it? There's a resistance, he said, to making the dream practical. You feel like you're betraying the dream if you try to make it practical. Because, of course, we can dream so much bigger than we can do many other things. And it's very important to dream dream big. But once we dream big and have this picture of the possible, it doesn't serve us just to dream. And it doesn't, as I said, it doesn't serve us spiritually to dream, because just to dream, because then there's a certain inner reluctance to engage, or a certain inability to understand how to engage. And usually that inability is based on some actions by the tricky subconscious, who are just confusing us in our ideas. And I've talked about certain ones of them. The time when I was living at Ananda village, and it became necessary for many reasons, including the fact that Swami suggested I do it, that I build a small house. And naturally, if you're going to do something, you want to do it nicely within a very small budget, but still to do it nicely. But I found myself so resistant to engage, because I prided myself on my disinclination for anything having to do with comfort or luxury or even beauty, for that matter. And I had combined them in my mind with which to be poor and to live in ugly circumstances, unattractive circumstances, means that I'm a spiritual person. I mean, that's lifetimes in little stone cells and things like that. But that's not, I mean, happily in little stone cells. I remember traveling in Greece, and we visited some ancient monastery, and there was this little stone room with a little water spigot right outside the door, and just no amenities. And I loved that room. I mean, my companions practically had to drag me out of there. It was just like, oh, home. This finally feels like home. On the Mount of Temptation in Jerusalem, there is this monastery built just right on the cliff. Now, of course, these are remarkable little places, but these tiny little rooms that are just built onto this cliffside, just looking out over this rather barren desert toward the Dead Sea, and a little bit of the town of Jericho in between. But again, it was like, oh, where have you been all my life? You know, a 10 by 10 foot room. It did have a bright window, which I really liked, but still, that like feels natural to me. So, but Swami Kriyananda says, build a small house. And it's just like my subconscious mind just starts fighting with me. But it wasn't an expansive direction to cling to that. And so the inability to take our ideals and then see how they can be manifested in this world, the ability to do that brings into play all kinds of other factors, like a whole lot of what we've been talking about: expansive versus contractive, not being bound by subconscious ideas, being able to see in the moment what's needed, all of these things. The lack of practicality is almost always a sign of some other issue. And the more we justify it and the more we explain it to ourselves, and just talk about living above the ordinary realities of this world, I will say rarely is that really to our spiritual benefit. I want to give a little space for the possibility, but that's why Master Swami's guru said to him, you have to be practical in your idealism. He wasn't exactly scolding him, but it was a very stern statement. You can't just affirm things. You have to also match that affirmation with a willingness to deal with reality as it is. I mean, there is a natural inclination in many of us not to want to deal with reality as it is. Like, who would want to? Ananda's never been a popular movement. We've never been much in tune with this culture. And with all due respect, who would want to be? It's just really, and sometimes I'm increasingly amazed as I dip my toe in it. Now, this isn't just age related. I dropped out of popular society probably when I was 20. And I really never looked back. I mean, my friends have to explain everything to me. I lived without television I still live without television, but the internet changed everything. I lived without television, and every time I look at it, I think, my, that's interesting. Swami remarked that when people listen to the music of our times, he said all they'll say is, boy, and he's talking about in a higher age in the future, they'll just say, boy, those people had problems. I don't want to condemn every artist, because there have been beautiful things written. But yeah, these people have problems. So it's a natural disinclination. And the material plane is a hard plane to work with. I understand the astral plane is much nicer, where you can just materialize your thoughts. On this plane, you have to pick up the rocks with your bare hands and you have to carry them to the next location. Yeah, it's tiresome, but it also builds our willpower, and it builds our willingness to deal with the hand that God has given us, instead of, and I have to say this in a gentle way, but it's the truth, instead of always being just a little above it. I remember because it's me, but I have always been sensitive. I am sensitive. And by that, I don't just mean that I rile up easily, and I'm going to put all this in the past tense. I used to rile up very easily. I still rile more than some, but not as easily as I used to. I'm very proud to say that. I'm very pleased to say that. But I also am just aware of energy. I'm aware of what people are doing. My visual sense is exceedingly acute, so are my ears. I just know what's going on around me. I both sense it and observe it. And it's just part of who I am. And as a consequence, a great deal that happens, I have felt in my life assaulted by it. I can't go there, I can't go here. I was in Whole Foods once trying to buy laundry soap. I mean, why I would buy laundry soap at Whole Foods, especially then when it was called Whole Paycheck, because every time you go in there, the prices were so high. So why would I buy laundry soap there? But for some reason I was. And it was on the bottom shelf, and I was crouched on the floor. I mean, laundry soap is not a big issue, but I just wanted to see of the choices. Probably I was looking for the cheaper one, just like, what are my choices here? And I could not make a decision. I just couldn't decide what laundry soap to buy. And I thought, this is a little crazy. And then I became aware, because I had just blocked it out. I looked up, and there was one of the store loudspeakers was right on the ceiling above me, and it was playing. I can't use the word music. It was playing rhythmic noise, and it was. I felt assaulted, and I mean, I'm on the floor, sort of practically in the laundry soap shelf, crawling into it, trying to escape these sound waves that are just assaulting me. And so I came to my senses and walked out of the store without buying anything, and took the trouble to tell the manager that I was leaving without buying anything. I pointed out, you see, why not? I'm the policeman of the whole world, so why not? I pointed out to him that his prices were very expensive, and as a result, only people who were somewhat established in life could shop there. I know it's changed. I understand it's changed management, ownership now, and it's a little different. Only people who were established could shop there. And most of us were a little older and didn't like that kind of music. So I wanted him to know. He kind of shrugged me off, because if you think something is good, you think everybody should enjoy it. And so he just wrote me off as a crabby old lady, and that was fine with me. But I'd done my part. Now, all of that is to say, no wonder we don't want to relate to this world. In the astral world, the vibrations are homogeneous, and we live in a world that's harmonious with us. Here, we have a job to do. We have a job to do on ourselves, and if we're trying to serve a higher ideal, we have a super serious job to do for this world. I mean, it's really our responsibility to be instruments of a higher consciousness, because the visionaries, the people who can see an alternative, are the ones who move the society in a new direction. And we are part of Dwapara Yuga. We see a reality, and a whole lot is good going on in this world. There is such a thing as Whole Foods. They play that horrible music, but it exists. It's a wonderful place. You can just wander out and buy all this great stuff. In the 70s, I had to make all that myself. Nobody sold it. Good bread, good ice cream, good granola, good jam. You had to make it. Everything was homemade. Now, all of that is to say, There's a reason why we're here, and there's a reason why we have to do it. And when we use our willpower ineffectively, time after time, we set ourselves impossible goals because we're not clear enough and focused enough and willing to face what it takes to accomplish something in this world. We set impossible dreams. Even if we put a reasonable amount of willpower behind them, if the whole thing wasn't practical from the start, it weakens our will to continually not succeed at what we set ourselves to do. It makes us feel like people who can't succeed. And we might be people who succeed very well if we set ourselves realistic goals. So if you find that you are repeatedly ineffective, it may not be that you're ineffective. It may be the resistance to really looking at things as they are. We need to mentor, and we need to become mentees to people who have the practical ability to accomplish things. That's really what began to change me, is I began to be around people who were willing to deal with reality. And I just watched how much more good they accomplished for their high ideals when they just accepted that there were certain limitations to this plane of consciousness. And it's not the astral world. We can't just think it and manifest it. We have to actually move the rocks. And you could only move so many rocks. You can't just move them all. They won't just sort of get up and wander where you want them to go, which I've been told in the astral world they will. Now we have to really do that. So one of the things that Swami says is we often think also that we have to think at the highest level or else we're betraying our ideals. We have to expect a miracle or else we're not really trusting God. So the way Swami puts it is, he said, we should never exercise our faith more than one step beyond what we've actually experienced. Yes, it's true that God can rearrange heaven and earth and create a whole miracle, but if we don't really know, if we haven't experienced, if there's no part of us that doesn't believe that, but if that's who you are, you don't need to be listening to me. The rest of us know that many things are theoretically possible, but there's an actual point where we have experienced it. You know, one of the things that's happened to me in this money course is I've come to a greater understanding of, I've actually experienced a great deal of money magnetism, more than I realized. Because money per se, checkbooks and bank accounts and numbers on a page, has been a little obscure to me, but I'm moving even into that area with a little more intelligence than I've had in the past, because I have had a lot of experience. You know, I remember dealing with a friend of mine who constantly worried about whether she would have enough money. I mean, I've known her for decades, and she constantly worried. And now she's elderly and she's unwell, and she has all the money she needs. And when she was always worried, finally toward the end, I said to her, in all your years, has God ever failed you? And she said, no. I said, well, why do you think he would start now? Now, she was the opposite. She was refusing to believe the evidence in front of her. But the point is, we have to believe the evidence in front of us, then we have to push it just a little. You know, when I started Money Mondays and the Patreon account and asking people to help support the mission of the masters that I'm carrying out, I had hit the limit of what I could depend on others to support, and I had to step into this. And I committed myself to people, and I committed myself to bills, to outpaying, a solid amount of money every month, which I'd never done before, but it was just a step beyond. Because every time in my life that I have really needed anything, it has always come to me. But not, well, recently, there's a house near Ananda Village that was for sale, and it's a house I've always really liked. It was only 600,000, and then the monks in India are building a monastery, and they needed another 500,000. So I thought quietly to myself, $1 million would be nice, but I didn't put my will behind $1 million. because I've never manifested on that level. But on the level I've needed for the mission of the masters, that was just a little bigger than me. You see? I didn't say, oh, I'll build the monastery, I'll buy that house. It crossed my mind to think about doing both. And I did have little conversations with Swamiji about whether there was $1 million in someone's pocket. And then I had to think, but if I did get it, would this be the right use of it? All these different questions. But it was too big for me, and I could tell. But I could also tell that someday it might not be, because it's on the same wire. But let's set our goals where we can set them, because, as I've said in earlier places, if we can succeed in lots of small ways, we begin to feel like a person who can get it done. And if you are a person who can get it done, all I can say is I used to be a person who didn't know I could get it done. And the knowledge that I can get it done, because I was often ineffectual. I was ineffectual for slightly different reasons. More of the tricky subconscious, just making life a little chaotic. But just to know, oh, I've set my will to many things in the past, and when I do, I get it done. And just think of the relaxation that creates. Well, I can think about it easily. But that's all about being practical in your idealism, that we do a good thing. I've also noticed with Swamiji over the years, he's often rewritten his books. He'll write it once, and then maybe a decade later, well, in one particular case, he actually wrote it 3 times in 1 year, but that was an odd situation. That was his book about consciousness in the arts, which was he wrote that 7 times. But the way I finally began to understand Swami's thinking was, we'll do a good thing now, and we'll do a better thing later. Part of impracticality and lack of practicality in your idealism, if I can't do it perfect, I won't do it at all. But that isn't how Swami operated. He would do the best he could do in the moment, all things considered. All things considered are everybody else's energy, the resources available, the time that he has, the understanding that he has in the moment. I'll do a good thing now, and then I can do a better thing later. And that also, to be practical in your idealism, to my mind now, it's like if it's 51% good, it's worth doing. Swamiji has had a wonderful expression sometimes when people will say that so-and-so isn't really capable, or this one has a problem, or something like that. Swami will say, well, do you think they're doing more good than harm? And that's a very interesting way to put it. If a person, maybe they have a lot of faults, but overall, are they doing more good than harm? And if they're doing more good than harm, then why would you not want them to keep doing it? I mean, everybody creates a lot of chaos in their lives. We have all these past life experiences, and relationships go south. I know that I've been the mother of a monastery on more than one occasion, and I don't think I was really nice to my girls. At least that's what they all tell me in this incarnation. And one marvelously disharmonious relationship I had with a woman, she told me that she was a very happy indigenous person on some island somewhere, frolicking naked on the beach. And I showed up as a Anglican missionary and put her in a muumuu, is how she said. And it actually perfectly described our relationship. That was a fact. And I could see it. I have a lot of willpower. So let's see, what was all that? Oh, yes. So even in our trying to do good, oftentimes we have things we have to work out. And so that's also part of being practical in our idealism, is that, yeah, just because I mess up, even in colossal ways, doesn't mean that I can't persevere or that the dream is destroyed. It means this is how we achieve it. We all learn, we all grow, we all get better, and we all have to work within within as big as your aura is. When I was talking about trying to get $1 million to do a couple of things that I thought would be great to do, both of which are probably happening nicely on their own. I'm not going to end up in the house, but that doesn't matter. It was really just a fleeting thought, but it did pass through me. I'm sure the monastery is going to happen without my my non-existent $500,000. But the point is, let's see now, what is the point? Oh dear. Oh, the point is moving within, oh yes, within our own force field. We all have a certain level of energy. Swamiji's energy was so enormous. He had so many challenges and so many obstacles. His horoscope, apparently, whatever it is, it's full of things that oppose each other. And he has a friend who's an astrologer who would often comment, I don't know how Kriyananda lives with that horoscope. And then people would say, all the problems you've had in your life. Swami genuinely says, what problems? What challenges? Because what he faces is the same size as him. And he does that which is the same size as his aura. And therefore he's pushing, he's using 100% of his energy, but he's not trying to fly. He's not trying to become president of the United States. He's not trying to convert, the worst dictator in the world. That's all beyond his aura to do it, or anybody's aura to do it. But he can found communities and write books and help thousands of us get closer to the path and be busy all the time. And it's the right size for him because he's realistic. He faces what comes. When we feel ourselves blocking things out, we're beyond our aura. We have to be able to, okay, this is what we're dealing with. So much for theory. Let's deal with reality. Let's be practical in our idealism. Just because an idea is beautiful, this is another thing that I've had to learn slowly. I'm a very creative person. I can think of all kinds of things to do. And for a long time, I thought, if I can think of it, I have to do it. And one day I realized how presumptuous. You're going to have many more ideas than you're going to have time, energy, talent, or willingness to carry out. Just the realization that just because I can think of it doesn't mean I have to do it. I have to be practical in my idealism. And part of it comes back to what we've been talking about this whole time, self-honesty. Yes, I may someday be able to manifest $1 million just by saying, Divine Mother, I need $1 million. But it's not today. Today I can say, would you subscribe to YouTube? And then I can also say, maybe you want to join Patreon. That's the right size for me. And I'm having fun with your help operating in the right size for me. I'm idealistic, endlessly idealistic, uncompromisingly idealistic. But being practical in our idealism is how to be idealistic. Because then you look back and you see that an awful lot of what you wanted to do was manifested. And that's what Swami wants for us. The last point he makes, and he makes it very strongly, and this is what I'll really deal with tomorrow. He says you have to be conscious in the way you relate to this world. You can't retreat into a more beautiful world than this one. We should live in the beauty of the divine at all times, but not because we're afraid to relate to this world as it is. And that's the concept Swami calls crystal clarity. And it's this beautiful little 4-paragraph advice for living. And I want to give it appeared earlier in this book, but I just passed over it at that time. But tomorrow I'd like to give it our full attention. So God bless you.